Hello, I'm Brian Hennen. I am presently an emeritus professor at the University of Western Ontario, newly named Western University, and as well I'm the same rank at Dalhousie University. I've had a long career in family medicine, which connected with Ian McWhinney in late 1969 when I was traveling to meet him in London, Ontario as a possible candidate for membership in his department. That happened to transpire, and as it unfolded, it turned out that Ian and I were sharing a teaching practice in the St. Joseph's Family Medical Center. So I had an opportunity to observe him practice, and it was a great pleasure to be able to see him operate and to see him teach. I wanted to talk today mainly, however, about his family and his involvement in family life. Ian's parents came from Britain. His father practiced in a small mining community and then moved to Stratford. So he spent most of his growing up time in Stratford-on-Avon. His father was a general practitioner, was a crusty guy who was very solid in his beliefs. And he had organized with others a group practice in Stratford-on-Avon, and Ian actually became a junior partner at one stage. When Ian moved to Canada at the invitation of Doug Bocking, the Dean of Medicine at Western, there was some disruption in his family. His two daughters, Heather and Julie, had some reservations about moving away from their home into this other country. But they made the move, and it went well. Ian had met Betty quite a few years before. Betty was a graduate physician as well and had done postgraduate training in ophthalmology. She came with her two girls to join Ian in London, and they had a good family life there. Betty's parents aged and eventually moved from Britain to live upstairs in a modified flat above Ian and Betty and their family. I was always impressed with Ian's interaction with his in-laws, how generous he was with his time and consideration of their needs. He also wrote his father a handwritten letter every Sunday evening, no matter where he was, and if at home with guests, would excuse himself for half an hour in order to write to his dad. His sister, whose name was Patricia, had married a farmer in Britain, and Ian would go back for visits to see her, and I was able to visit the farm and watch Ian and watch his dad at that time handle the sheep. And I always remember his dad, who was quite a small man, as was Ian, moving the sheep around with a large stick. When Ian's dad quit practice, he stayed in town, and he thought it would be a good thing to drop in every week at the group practice to see how things were going. On one of Ian's visits, one of the other partners took him aside and asked him if he could arrange that the senior Dr. McWhinney discontinued his visits, because he would come for coffee, find out what was going on from the staff, and then suggest how things should change. Both Ian's girls were married and had kids. Heather and Julie were pretty individualistic and developed their own programs of learning. Heather became a publisher's agent, I guess you could say, and she would travel across Canada visiting clinical departments of all sorts, trying to entice them to write publications. Julie, I didn't know quite as closely because Heather used to come and visit us, but Julie worked independently as well, and is currently, in my understanding, working as a social support person near Peterborough, Ontario. When Betty got ill with a fairly unrelenting malignancy, Ian undertook to look after her. And it was even prior to that he had already shown a strong interest in palliative care. When he extended his personal caring to Betty, he didn't realize how absolutely fatiguing and tiring it was going to be. And he commented to me, "I've looked after an awful lot of people who were dying, but I did not realize the extent of the effort it took for the family to keep them at home and look after them." Ian's life after Betty died was quite lonely, I think. He lived in a small apartment in downtown London, would travel to Heather in Saskatoon and spend several months there at a time each year. And as he failed with his neurological problems, he was expressively aphasic, but he could understand everything you said. And he liked to engage in conversation, and he did write his memoirs. At the end of his time in London, he moved back to spend the rest of his life with Heather in Saskatoon. In London, he found himself in a long-term care facility, which was very well equipped and modernly established. But he was totally frustrated by the fact that there were no roommates or friends in the center who had cognitive capacity. So he had no one really to talk to. And I think that was a real lonely time for him. When he died, of course, people came from long distances. Messages came from all over the world. And I think he gave us something in his writings and his understanding of family medicine that will not ever be replaced by anybody else. It was a great pleasure to know him as a human being, as a teacher, as a physician, and as a friend.